All right, everybody, welcome back to Pyramid 40K. I think there's a little bit here for everybody today, and I have a lot of thoughts I'm going to try and cover regarding Kill Team. So maybe grab a figure and a paintbrush, or just sit back and let's just talk Kill Team for a little bit. So I met the enemy in glorious battle today as the GW near me kicked off its Kill Team competition this weekend. So the way it works is that each player can play a total of 4 matched play games per week for this Kill Team League, and these are rated games, so the outcome is tallied week to week over the next 3 weekends to see kind of who comes out on top. Interestingly, even though this is match play, in this competition, your specialists and your fire teams will gain experience like a regular campaign, which is fascinating to me because what this kind of means is that there are already people with specialists leveling up. And if you fall behind or you don't get your 4 games in that week, or if you play somebody who's maybe 3 games in for the week, but this is your first game, all of these things mean it's kind of possible for some guys to start out on the back foot. So we'll kind of have to see how this goes. It's a really interesting thing. It's uncharted territory, and it's been fun so far. Now, if you watch this channel, you'll know that the guys where I live, I've said it before, they take competitive lists, competition very seriously. I had thought Kill Team here might bring out some of the narrative side of these guys, but right away, when they started setting up, they're still talking about additions to their ITC lists and stuff like that. So right away, I'm just like, yep, this is going to be a rough few weeks. So I have some thoughts I'll just be sharing, and I'd love it if you would chime in the comments for a bit of discussion. Maybe you can tell me what you think, some of the ideas, maybe some ideas you have yourselves. And if we put all that in the comments, maybe we can get a good discussion going. So first, the big question I think most people are going to find valuable is what armies are people playing in a competitive setting? And interestingly, I was the only one playing straight Tyranids today. Death Guard is very popular. Space Marines are popular. There was a Necron player that was doing pretty well for himself. And AdMech and GSC are there, of course, being the poster boy starter armies for Kill Team. So pretty much, I'd say if you're looking to get in Kill Team, those guys seem to do pretty well today in the league competition day 1. So if you're trying to figure out what army to pick, you want something that maybe will do well, I'd say any of those are probably a pretty decent starting place. So Reavers with grapnel launchers are in every Space Marine lists. Marine players are absolutely loving these things. They are fairly flexible, like Space Marines are known to be. And the grapnel launchers, what they do is they let the Space Marine players ignore vertical distance when they're moving. So they're just zipping around this 3D Kill Team environment with no problems at all. And the 2 wounds and the ability to ignore the first flesh wound, all of that doesn't hurt either. So let's talk Tyranids and kind of what it was like day 1. First off, the Tyranid tactics are huge. In both my games today, there were times that a very gloomy looking situation just suddenly turned into no problem at all thanks to the tactics. I really like, like for example, being able to have the movement profile of fly suddenly on a guy when I need it. So it's really interesting. And the thing though is that with my Tyranids today, it was very tough to make it into close combat. In my second game especially, I really struggled because my opponent chose to set traps in the scouting phase, and he rolled a 6 for the D3 roll, so he was able to trap 3 key places of terrain in very tightly bottlenecked areas of the board where I didn't have a lot of options except to move through them anyway eventually. It was so effective that after today, I'm close to just flat out saying an assault-based army should pretty much always just choose check for traps in the scouting phase because I really got caught today. The main problem for an assault list in trapped games is that there's a lot of terrain in Kill Team, which normally should help us. But when it's trapped, the enemy can create bottlenecks and choke points where there's dangerous terrain, and suddenly my advancing Gene Stealers were moving like 5.5 inches instead of the full 11 I had rolled for the advance. So basically, all the opponent had to do at that point was sit back with big guns and a decent position and just roll dice while I was sitting there drowning, treading water. So I still did okay once I made it into combat, but by then I was dealing with flesh wounds, nerfing my, previously scary Gene Stealers. So they did okay, but they were a lot tamer than I needed them to be because of all the shenanigans that was put onto them and the modifiers and all that stuff. So the main obstacle with NIDs is getting into charge range without getting nerfed or killed. So like any good Tyranid hive mind, I'm adapting. I have some ideas I'm going to work on to see if they help me get my guys in. But just know all of this is still a work in progress, so nothing is definitive yet. So first, I'm thinking I'm going to add a few Hormagaunts to my Kill Team roster. I'm locked into Tyranids now for the next few weeks because that's just how the rules of the league are. Since that's what I had on day 1, that's what I'm going to have for the whole thing. My thinking is that for 4 points with the Gaunt, the Hormagaunt, I get a model that has the same movement profile as the Gene Stealer. So the Gene Stealer can move 8 inches, so can the Hormagaunt. So I'm going to try to stack like 2 Gene Stealers behind each Gaunt and march them up the board kind of in conga lines, providing some obscure shenanigans for my Gene Stealers if it's possible. So yes, I hate throwing away 4 points, but I can't have my Gene Stealers getting into combat with 2 flesh wounds already on them, giving penalties to hit now, and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking 4 points, yes, it's kind of tough, but it might be worth it, in tight games of Kill Team, where it's potentially wasting enemy shooting and keeping wounds or attention off of my Stealers if needed. So the other thing I noticed is guys are really trying to catch mistakes in Kill Team and use any chance they can get to remove models. So even if that's where a model that seems fairly inconsequential. So I'm thinking that these tiny, cheap little Gaunts can potentially be a red herring to kind of draw enemy attention away from other things in my list if I need it to do that. So in chess, my thinking here is that there's a concept known as the poisoned pawn. And the poisoned pawn is a pawn that looks like an easy target for the enemy, but there's an exchange that takes place if the opponent takes it. So maybe it loses them a tempo so that you can catch up now. Maybe it breaks up a strong structure that was keeping you from advancing something else, where you wanted it to be. Maybe it exposes another piece that the one that moved was defending, and on it goes. Now, I'm no chess genius of, or anything of the sort, but I've always thought the tactic was fascinating because it looks like you made a mistake, but, it was very deliberate a lot of times. So I'm just going to play with some of these concepts in Kill Team and see if it doesn't buy me time to maneuver or outflank or divide the enemy's attention or make them waste resources targeting a model that I've already written off. So we'll see how that goes. Another thing I think is very interesting in Kill Team is the aspect of a roster before the actual games. So the roster is already set up. That's what the opponent sees. Now the roster can have anything on it that you want. So I'm wondering if there aren't some opportunities for subtle psychological warfare here in this kind of competitive environment. This might sound strange, but the fact is the enemy doesn't know what you have in your case or what you're going to end up fielding in that game. So you might have a roster of 20 models, but only end up putting 3 or 4 guys on the table. So long story short, my idea is to kind of maybe throw the opponent off my scent, so to speak, or feed them maybe a bit of misinformation in a way that makes them anticipate one thing and then I do something else. So for example, if I added 3 Lictors and a Tyranid warrior on my roster, I don't have to take those in actual games, but that might just make my opponent bring fewer models with stronger guns, thinking that they're going up against a few elite beasts rather than a swarm of Gene Stealers. And since my Stealers have a 5-up invuln, I don't really care if they bring a lot of AP and, these deadly weapons. So if they tailor an army to fight something, but then end up fighting something else, I think there's something to be said for that, especially if they end up maybe bringing fewer models at a higher cost to themselves. So that is good for me. So I'm just kind of wondering about this and thinking, the meta, the big picture here. I'm going to try some of these things out, because simply put, the opponent doesn't know what you have in your case that day. Only what's on your roster. And the question is, what would the Alpha Legion do in that situation, So another thing I'm doing for now is I'm playing around with only taking 2 specialists sometimes rather than taking 3 always. I'm doing this because in match play, there's a few missions that award the enemy victory points for slaying specialists. So if I bring 1 less specialist in a game, that means he has 1 less opportunity to score a victory point. So this is going to have to be a balancing act. Of course, this is still just me testing things, so I'm still not 100% sure on this. Please don't think I'm saying, oh, don't take all the specialists or something. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just trying to navigate this game in this competitive league over this next few games and kind of see what works and what doesn't. And I'm wondering, hey, if he has 1 last chance, 1 less chance to get a victory point, why not play with that sometimes? So the question is, would having the scout and the additional stats that provides outweigh the loss of not bringing him? So we'll have to see. I'm going to play this out, test it out, and we'll go from there. So next, I'm really looking for cheesy combos and ideas for the Tyranids, since I'm locked into them for the next few weeks instead of Gene Stealer cults. It's just that certain things seem like they're going to stack very well on paper for the Tyranids, So we'll have to see how this, kind of goes. But one example that I see is a veteran specialist and their adaptive tactics strategy stacking with take forward positions in the scouting phase. So if you put something like that on a lictor, that's a combo of up to 15 inches and an additional 9 inches on top of all that before turn 1 even begins. So that's a hell of a scout move. But like I said earlier, the problem here is that it can be absolutely nerfed if the enemy plants traps. So it's situational, and I wouldn't be surprised if I still end up choosing check for traps in most future games after my experience today. But I'm still trying to look through this rule book and kind of see, what are some neat combos? What are, maybe some beardy things that stack well together or, provide something interesting. So one last thing I'll say in closing about Kill Team is that the environment is just different than regular games of 40K so far. So in my second game especially, some of these guys that are normally very competitive and might stick to themselves in their games were crowding around my game rather than just setting up the next one of theirs. And there were a few rolls I made that literally had a dozen people screaming in a good way. So, it was just this battling grind. And it had this different feel or a vibe to the environment of the gaming scene for some reason, and I really liked that. I think it has something to do with the small game boards. The small game boards mean that people are tending to stack games on shared tables, so you're really kind of more packed in than you would be in normal 40K. And it just seems like there's more interaction happening because of all that. So I know some people normally don't like a peanut gallery forming around their table, but I have this channel because I like talking about 40K. And people, were generally interested in my Gene Stealer list, and we were having fun even if they weren't playing at the moment. So overall, it was a good day and a great experience for me. So Kill Team has been just wonderful. And I hope you guys are having fun with it too. So that's it. Please wish me luck as I try all of this out and I try to get my 4 weeks, or all 4 of this week's rated games in for the league over the next couple days of the weekend. And maybe consider sharing your thoughts and opinions on some of what I've said here with me in the comments below. And especially if you're playing Tyranids and you're kind of seeing what I am, that, oh, okay, once we get into combat, we're decent, but I need to get there without flesh wounds, without dying. What are some of your strategies that you're doing? Your hive mind is always appreciated, and I enjoy the chats we have on this channel. So that's it, guys. I'm just wishing you all the best in Kill Team. Thank you very much to the subscribers for sharing and all of this with me. And I'll talk to you again soon here on Tyranids 40K.